Hey everyone, in today's tutorial, we are going to look at syncing Airtable with Webflow using FinSuite's Nobull. And specifically, we are going to sync multi-reference fields between the two. So let's dive in. We're going to start from scratch on this one. So just to give you an idea, but overall, the concept here and the thing that tripped me up a little bit as I was doing this was you're basically creating redundant databases on Webflow and in Airtable. So anything that you want synced, you need to have them in both places, obviously. But the key, and I think the thing that one of the things that tripped us up was that your multi-reference fields need to also be a synced table in your base, in your Airtable base. So you can't do them as a multi-select or as a single select. You need to do your reference fields as additional tables in your Airtable. So that's the first thing to note, is that you're going to start filling up your Airtable with whatever multi-reference fields you have. Secondly, something that tripped us up was that you can't use a synced base. You need to have all of your data living right inside your Airtable. You can't be pulling your data from another base because the publish button doesn't seem to work. So that was another rake that we stepped on a little bit, was that we were trying to pull data from another base that we were syncing with, and then our publish button wasn't working. The third thing to note is that there are certain columns or certain fields that you need to have in your Airtable, and you kind of can't mess around with those. You need to have them, and you need to make sure that they are exactly as kind of prescribed. So when you are syncing from Airtable to Webflow, you're going to need a couple more fields than if you're going from Webflow to Airtable. So, and those fields are actually your publish field and your status field. So one thing to note, that your status field, you need to have 3 options, no more, no less. You need to have the 3 options. And those are the 3 options of your collection item: active, archive, and draft. And then the publish is a checkbox, and then the others that you need are also name, item ID, and slug. So let's dive in a little bit here. I have a blank Webflow site. I'm not going to show this. I'm not going to kind of display this on the page. I'm just going to show how to set it up and how to sync. So I'm going to create my first collection. Let's just call this team, and we'll do like a baseball team or a basketball team. So we'd have team name, teams, and then we're going to have team name, and then we'll probably end up, I'll have to create that, but create my multi-reference field. So I'm going to do teams and players. So I've got teams, and then I'm actually going to make players. So I've got player name, and maybe we do like, yeah, that's fine. Player name. So I can create my collections, but now I've got to actually go back into teams, because teams are made up of players. So here's my multi-reference field that I'm going to call players, and I'm going to pull in my players. Okay. So now the way that I did it, that I thought was helpful, because I was able to download and get all the Webflow IDs, was I actually created all of my, I started by creating at least some, or a lot of my records in Webflow. So when you think of them like their meta tags, if they're not changing that much, it doesn't really matter. Otherwise, if you're going to be adding a lot of players as we're going on, you probably want to manage it inside of Airtable. Either way, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't really matter which way you start. If you want to start with all your data in Airtable and then move it into Webflow, you can do that. I just happen to start the other way because it made more sense for my use case. But I'm going to add a new player. We're going to do, I was going to say Giannis Antetokounmpo, but I don't know how to spell that, sadly. I suppose I could find it. Giannis. There we go. Let's do Giannis, the MVP. And to give our Phoenix contingents some love, maybe we create a Devin Booker and we'll probably want to have, since it's a multi-reference, let's also do a Chris Paul, and then I'm going to get the other Chris Middleton. Let's bring in over Chris Middleton from the Bucks as well. Chris Middleton. Okay. So we've got a few players. Now let's create our teams. We're going to have the Bucks, the Milwaukee Bucks, and that is Giannis and Chris. And then I also have my, I've got the Suns, the Phoenix Suns. So I'm going to have Chris and Devin Booker. Okay. So now I've got my two teams. As this is a very simple setup, but for the sake of illustration here, what we're trying to show is that we have to recreate these in Airtable to then sync them with Webflow. So we'll call this first table, we'll call this teams. And then I'm just going to duplicate this table because they've got all my fields that I want. So I'm going to call this players. So I've got my my players, my teams. Since I'm going to, I guess in this case, I want to go from Airtable to Webflow. I need to have all 5 of these fields. If I was going Webflow to Airtable, I don't need the publish and status field. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just export our teams. We've got a CSV that we're going to export. So I'm going to, now what I need is these item IDs. I need my item IDs, and you could probably you could bring these into, you could load them into Airtable, but we got since there's only 2, I'm going to drag these in. And if I had more data, I'd probably try to line everything up. But these are my 2 fields, or my 2 teams, and then I got to come back in and I've got to get my players. I'm going to export my players. Now, the reason that I like doing these in starting in Webflow is because they give me my ID. They give me my item ID, which is kind of nice. Now we could sync that way. So that wouldn't really, be a problem, but it is just helpful. Got my item ID. Okay. Pretty simple. Now I should probably come over here and publish my site. Cool. Now what I'm going to do is I need to go find the Nobull app. Add the app. So now what you actually need to do is, I'm just going to hide this. We're actually going to sync our player table and we're going to sync our teams table. So we're syncing both. And the thing that's important here, and the reason I'm pointing this out is because to do a multi-reference field or multi-reference sync, I need to have both tables be syncing with Nobull. So I need to have my players syncing with Nobull, and then I need to also then have my team syncing with Nobull. If the players was a multi-select, that wouldn't work. Or if I actually wasn't, even if it was a, I can add this, I could link to another record, right? And even if my players were linked like this, and so all the information is there. If my players, I did that wrong. If my players weren't synced, then it wouldn't work. If that makes sense. So I'm creating my, let's add my players over here. So my Bucks have Giannis and Chris. The Suns have Chris and Devin. Okay, so now we're going to do new connect, and we're going to generate an API key from our Webflow account, and I'm going to come down here to Nobull sync, authorize key, paste it, submit it. The site that I want to sync is my Nobull site. And now what we can do is we can say my Webflow collection, I'm in, let's actually start with players. So I'm going to sync players to my Airtable players. Okay. And coming down here, I've got my mandatory fields. My mandatory item ID is going to be item ID. My name, is Airtable name. Slug. Okay, now because this is players, and I really, the one I really care about is team, so I'm just going to actually leave that. The data will be taken from, let's start an Airtable. I'm going to update manually. I'm going to save and publish. Okay. So now you can see there that they've got 4. It says 4 processed, and that's because it's actually, well, you'll actually see once we do the multi-step, it actually goes through every multi-reference field. It's going to go through all of the fields. So you'll kind of see it starts to grow exponentially a little bit. So I'm going to add a new connection so now I have my players connection, but now I'm going to add a new connection. I'm actually just going to paste in that same API key. That was another thing that I learned. We can use the same API key. And I'm using my Nobull sync. I'm going to go from teams to teams. Item ID, name, slug. And then I want to add an additional field because I want to sync this players field. So I'm going to sync players. And now because I've synced my players table, I now have the ability to connect players. If I hadn't synced the players table, these wouldn't be available. So that is really the key of this whole thing, is that I synced the players table and now that worked. So the data is going to be taken from Airtable. I'm going to save it manual. And now what's going to happen here, see it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 4. And did you see how it actually updated 6 records? So I am going to, there was a fail. So let's check this out. You want to know why there was a fail? I think because I've got an extra. I think that might be the problem. So let's try it now. There we go. So I had an extra field, so that solved the problem there. So now if we come, I should be able to, let's just go and, I mean, I already had all the data in here anyway, so I don't expect to see anything new, but everything looks intact. So now if I come here and I say, let's add a new player, who's on the Bucks starting lineup. Bucks starting lineup. Let's take Drew Holiday. Drew. Okay. So we're going to take Drew Holiday, and I think if I just do that, it should work. Because we're getting, remember how we said we're taking the data from, you can see it up here, we're taking the data from Airtable to Webflow. So now I've added Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday is now, should be, I believe, if we refresh, should be added here. Now there's a chance, there he is, Drew Holiday. But the other key here, though, that we can now do is we can bring in Drew Holiday. Drew. Let's publish these. Set them to active. Oh, did I redo it? There's players, and now we're gonna do teams. So again, what I was saying there is it's got 7, so it's going through everything. So anyway, now our teams, our Bucks should have Drew Holiday. There we go. Drew. Simple situation here. This isn't a full, obviously it's not a full scale application. But you can see how if you were going to add more multi-reference fields, more multi-reference collections, what you'd want to do is just make sure that you are syncing Airtable and Nobull. Every one of those tables should sync, and then you should be able to do the multi-reference field. So hope that has been a helpful little walkthrough, kind of high level, simple, but hopefully it's been a helpful walkthrough and can help you out in the future. Alrighty, cheers.